I bought the house for peace. I craved a slice of land, a quiet escape from the city's constant hum, a place where my kids could feel grass under their feet, not hot concrete. It wasn't some grand mansion, but it was mine. I'd worked for 20 years as a mechanic, saving every penny for this dream. And when I finally signed those papers, the keys cold and heavy in my hand, I thought the hardest part was over. I was so wrong. The neighborhood looked perfect on the surface. Manicured lawns, rows of identical houses, and smiles that felt a little too practiced, a little too tight. But I pushed that feeling aside. I was focused on unpacking boxes, on building our new life. The first knock came 3 days after we moved in. A man in a starched polo shirt, an HOA badge clipped to his belt, stood on my porch. He didn't introduce himself by name, just got straight to the point. "We noticed your grass is already 2 inches over code," he said, his voice flat. "You'll need to fix that by tomorrow or face a $100 fine." I laughed. I honestly thought he was joking. 2 inches? Who measures grass to the inch? But he didn't even crack a smile. He just handed me a violation notice and walked away. That was my first lesson about the HOA. They weren't neighbors. They were enforcers, and this was their kingdom. At first, I tried to play their game. I was the new guy. I didn't want to make waves. I kept my lawn cut so low it was practically bald. I trimmed the hedges they said were too uneven. I even repainted my perfectly good mailbox because they claimed the color didn't match the commoders. Community standard. But it was never enough. No matter what I did, the violation letters kept coming. $50 here, $100 there. It felt less like maintaining a community and more like a shakedown. It was like they were looking for any excuse, any reason to push me out. Then came the real battle. Behind my house was a small strip of land. It wasn't much, just an acre that had been part of the old Johnson farm before the subdivision was built. Critically, it wasn't listed on any of the HOA maps because, technically, it wasn't theirs. It was still deeded to the old farm estate, stuck in legal limbo. But I knew my local history. I grew up in this county, and I remembered stories about that very piece of land. It had once been a community garden, a place where people came together. My plan was simple. I wanted to bring that back. Clear it up, plant vegetables with my kids, and make it something useful and beautiful again. The moment the HOA president saw me out there with a shovel, he stormed over, his face red. "This land belongs to the HOA," he snapped, jabbing a finger towards the field. "You can't touch it." I calmly explained that I had already pulled the county records. The deed was still in probate from the Johnson estate. It wasn't HOA property. He didn't care about facts. He threatened me with more fines, with legal action, with anything he could think of. And that's when I finally understood. This wasn't about rules or regulations. This was about power. It was about his control, and I was challenging it. The weeks that followed were a nightmare of harassment. They sent more letters, each more threatening than the last. They posted notices on my front door for the whole neighborhood to see. They even called a towing company on my work truck, claiming it was abandoned while it was parked in my own driveway. I caught them on my security cameras, sneaking onto my property with measuring tapes, trying to find a new violation, a new way to pressure me. They were getting desperate to break me. But they made one critical mistake. They completely underestimated how stubborn I can be when I know I'm in the right. I went back to the county clerk's office. I was on a mission. I asked for every single piece of paperwork tied to that strip of land. I spent hours digging through dusty files and archaic records, and then I found it. A loophole. A beautiful, glorious loophole. The Johnson estate with no heirs to claim the property, had finally listed the land for public auction, which meant it was available for anyone to purchase. That night, I sat in my kitchen, the paperwork spread out on the table. A single thought burned in my mind. If the HOA wanted a war, I would give them one. They wanted the land? Fine. I'll buy it myself. I put in my bid. I signed the documents. And within 2 weeks, that acre of land was officially, legally, and indisputably mine. The HOA didn't even know what happened until I put up a small, simple wooden sign at the edge of the grass. It read, "Private property. No trespassing." The president nearly had a heart attack when he saw it. He called an emergency board meeting. They tried to contest my ownership, throwing wild accusations around, even claiming I had forged the documents. But when the county clerk confirmed that everything was legal and by the book, the board was left powerless, fuming in their own defeat. That's when I decided to go further. This wasn't just about defiance anymore. It was about building something better. I fenced the land. I built raised garden beds. I even put in a small, tidy chicken coop. Curious neighbors started asking questions, and when I told them I'd be selling fresh eggs and organic vegetables at half the price of the grocery store, they started showing up. First one, then two, then a dozen, all with baskets and cash in hand. The HOA absolutely hated it. They sent me a flood of new violation letters, this time claiming I was operating a business in a residential area. But their power ended at my new property line. The land wasn't HOA property anymore. It wasn't even zoned under their control. Every notice they sent, I mailed right back, stamped in big red letters, "Not applicable." The more they fought me, the more the community rallied around me. For the first time in years, people had access to affordable, fresh food. Kids were running through the garden, picking strawberries right off the vine. Families were sitting on the picnic benches I'd built, just talking and laughing. It was starting to feel like a real neighborhood, not a prison of beige houses. The president finally snapped. One night, he showed up at my property with a pair of bolt cutters, intending to tear down my fence. But he didn't know I had cameras recording everything. The police arrived before he could even cut through the lock. And when I pressed charges, the court didn't just fine him. They forced the HOA itself to cover all of my legal fees. That was the crack that broke the dam. Other neighbors started digging through their own stacks of HOA letters. They started asking their own questions. One discovered the president had been pocketing money from maintenance fees. Another uncovered contracts with fake vendors, all tied to his brother-in-law's company. The truth spread like wildfire. Soon, the entire board was under investigation. At the final chaotic meeting before the HOA was dissolved, the president tried one last time to intimidate me. He pointed a shaking finger across the room and shouted, You ruined this community." I stood up, looked him dead in the eye, and said, "No, I just reminded this community what it's really supposed to mean." The HOA collapsed within weeks. The county stripped them of their authority. In its place, voluntary committees were formed. Neighbors voted to use the old dues for actual improvements, new streetlights, repairs to the playground, community events. And my little acre of land? It grew into something bigger than I ever imagined. We turned it into a full-blown co-op. Every family who wanted one got a plot. We shared the harvest, we shared the work, we shared our lives. We built something the HOA, with all its rules and fines, never could: trust. Years later, I still walk through that garden with my kids. The fence stands tall, the chickens still cluck, and every time I see my neighbors smiling, their baskets overflowing with fresh vegetables, I remember the words that started it all. This land belongs to the HOA, but it never did, and now it never will. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't shouting or fighting or paying fines. It's building something better, something stronger, right in the place where they tried to break you.